Committee will come to order. Please take your seats. Good morning. Welcome to the second meeting of the 2022 session of the House Standing Committee on Economic Development and Workforce Investment. Reminders, please silence all cell phones at this time. Members attending remotely, please indicate your location when the Secretary calls the roll. Only members in their annex office or on the Capitol campus will be counted as present and allowed to vote on bills. If any member has a question or a comment, please signal to Janine or Sasha. Members attending remotely that have a question or comment, please send a message in Zoom using the chat function. Sasha, please call the roll.
Representative Baker.
Present.
Representative Banta.
Present.
Representative Beckler. Representative Bojanowski.
Present in the room.
Representative Bray.
Present in the room.
Representative Brown. Representative Callaway.
Present in the room.
Representative Cantrell.
I will run out.
Representative Freeland.
Present in the room.
Representative Gentry.
Present in the room.
Representative Hart.
Present in the room.
Representative Huff.
Present in the room.
Representative Johnson.
Present in the room.
Representative King.
Present in the room.
Representative Kulkarni.
Present in the room.
Representative Lawrence. Representative Lockett.
Here in the room.
Representative Rowland. Representative Sharp.
Present in the room.
Representative Sheldon.
Present in the room.
Representative Tackett Lafferty. Representative Truitt.
Present in the room.
Representative Elliott.
I'm present in the room.
Chairman Weber.
Present in the room.
We do have a quorum and are duly constituted to do business this morning. The only bill on our agenda is House Bill 4, which is an act relating to unemployment insurance. The sponsor is our chairman, Representative Russell Weber, and at this time I will recognize him to introduce himself for the record and any guests that he has with him, and at that point you're free to proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Russell Weber, State Representative, 26th Legislative District.
Paul Zarapata, President of Kentucky Community and Technical College System.
Kate Shank, Senior Vice President, Public Affairs, Kentucky Chamber of Commerce.
Charles All, Senior Policy Analyst at the Kentucky Chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of this committee. We have before us House Bill 4 today, which is a bill we've heard quite a bit of discussion about. This is a bill that came as a result of many hours and months of working and looking at the unemployment issue and getting folks back to work.
There is a substitute, Mr. Chairman, and
there is, and at this time, if we could adopt
do we have a
that.
motion? There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And so the sub is adopted, and that's what we're.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will briefly explain before I get into the details of the bill as a whole, because I know members may have had some questions about the sub. One of the things that the cabinet reached out to us and made some recommendations. One is a name change, and we accommodated that. Also, a reporting period, and we've accommodated that. We had some other folks that reached out to part of the legislation that dealt with folks that had a definite return date. There was some clarification that was asked for there, and we've accommodated that in this legislation. And then Representatives Heath and Dossett reached out to me and asked that we incorporate in this bill some guaranteed language that would ensure that those folks that were affected by the tornado disaster last December will receive their unemployment payments. And so we've incorporated that. And so those are those are components that have now been included in the bill with the adoption of this committee sub. I know we frequently have discussions about committee subs, and I wanted to be transparent and have folks realize what we have in this bill. I'll run down briefly some of the key points of the bill, and then we'll have some statements from some folks here, and then be open to answering any questions. One of the components of the bill is that defines suitable work. 6 weeks after someone's received a benefit, updates the definition of suitable work after 6 weeks of receiving benefits to encourage claimants to expand their job search. I think this is an important part of the bill. We have folks that will need assistance, and this will encourage them and help them to expand that job search. Section number 3 of the bill sets the contribution rate for employers after 1 year as opposed to currently 3. This will help our small business owners, many who are struggling just hiring new employees to get off the ground, and we move that from 3 years to 1. We do have a work search component in this bill. Currently, right now, it is federal law and state law that individuals have to engage in at least one job search activity per week. This bill moves that up to 5 per week, and that would include 3 searches. For example, submitting an application, doing an interview, things like that, searching for a job, and then it would include 2 additional areas where an individual could shadow someone in a job, attend a job training program on how to search and look for jobs. I think this is important because it's been proven when individuals are proactive in their looking for jobs and active in that search, that more opportunities open up. And folks may see areas that they previously had not looked at as employment. Those opportunities would be available to them. We also have we move now to section number 7. This is the one that folks have talked about. We move to a component here where we base the number of unemployment weeks on the unemployment rate. This is currently done by 9 states. It's been proven that it strengthens the unemployment system. It encourages folks to find employment earlier, and we have built-in mechanisms throughout this bill that if we have an unemployment rate increase, then weeks are increased. And so there's added support for folks that are in that area. I know folks have talked to me about what if we have another major economic downturn, and there are mechanisms in the law, there are mechanisms in this bill that will allow for additional weeks to be triggered, emergency benefits that we saw during the pandemic. Those would still be available to folks. They would require General Assembly approval. As I said earlier, this bill clarifies that claimants with verified return-to-work prospects within 16 weeks are eligible for 16 weeks of benefits unless the state average unemployment rate is 6.5% or higher. At that point, it would trigger additional benefits that folks would receive under any higher unemployment period. There's been additional concern that folks have had whether, based on indexing, an individual's benefit amount would change. That would not. That benefit amount would remain the same. It's all based on the initial application and the initial approval for unemployment benefits. We have a section, the bill allows for the Secretary of the Labor Cabinet, with the approval of the General Assembly, to extend maximum duration benefits if federal extended benefits are triggered. So as I said, we do have those mechanisms built in place. If we have a major economic downturn, then it allows for individuals to receive additional weeks. We have a component in the bill for no-show interviews and job refusals. And this is one of the things we've heard from folks, as I'm sure many of you have heard from your constituents. You have individuals across the state that are in need of employees, and folks simply are not applying right now for work. And many times when they do have applications, they will schedule interviews, and folks will not show up for those interviews. So this is a mechanism that allows folks to report those individuals. And when they file that initial report on that, to flag that, there'll be opportunities to explain situations that are coming up. An individual, if they had trouble getting there, this is not a mechanism for employers to hammer people. This is for folks to be. This is for an accounting system on those that aren't showing up, and on job refusals. If someone is looking for and offered employment, and it's a suitable job and it's one that they can take, that job refusal should be noted and indicated. We move on to another part of the bill. It's the work share program. It consumes a huge part of the bill. The cabinet made this recommendation to our committee, and we included that in this bill. It is heavily governed by federal regulations, and so the secretary will have some pretty defined avenues that he has to take on this bill. So that's a huge part of it. Another component that I did want to mention that we're going to hear from the gentleman next to me is individuals that enroll in classes or additional educational training, whether it's for skilled positions or they want to pursue additional education. We're going to allow them to have up to 5 weeks of additional employment if they're enrolled in those programs and making progress. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of this committee, this is an important bill. I think it's one that is needed in the Commonwealth. A lot of work has gone into preparing it, and I would ask members to look at what we're attempting to do here, and support the bill. And at this point, I'll yield to our speakers who are here.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee for allowing me to be out here and talk about KCTCS a little bit. KCTCS believes the provisions in House Bill 4 are extremely advantageous to those who need help after losing jobs, helpful to employers, and also to Kentucky's economy. We are well aware of Kentucky's low workforce participation rate, and we see this bill as an opportunity to help turn it around. Since KCTCS was established by the General Assembly, we're the only higher education institution to have the legislative mandate for workforce. Everyone in this room knows that to succeed in today's workforce, Kentuckians must have education and training. And that doesn't always mean a bachelor's degree or even an associate's degree. Industry certifications are an essential part of what today's employers are looking for when hiring, and they aren't finding enough people with those credentials. We offer a good number of short-term credentials for in-demand careers. Some certificates can be completed in weeks or a few months that lead to good careers. For example, in 4 or 5 weeks, you can complete a CDL. In just a few months, our students can earn line worker credentials, be phlebotomists or pharmacy techs. Most have jobs waiting for them before they've even completed the program. One question I'm asked sometimes is why we've got so many locations, and that's because the mission of community and technical colleges is about access. We want people to be able to go locally, and so we've got locations within 30 minutes of everybody in this state. And our courses are affordable too. 70% of our students don't pay tuition because of state and federal financial aid, and only 14% of our students take out student loans, with an average loan being less than $4,000. So the provision in this bill to help laid-off workers to upskill and retrain is extremely important to Kentucky's employers and Kentucky's economy. House Bill 4 provides Kentuckians with the additional time needed to complete programs that can quickly better their lives by getting them into good-paying, high-demand careers. This in turn helps local and state economies and employers throughout the Commonwealth. KCTCS strongly supports House Bill 4. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak today in support of House Bill 4. As you know, we have been working on the unemployment issue in Kentucky for some time now, and we have been very focused on our worker shortage in Kentucky. And in fact, this past summer, we published a report on our workforce issues in Kentucky. It's called 20 Years in the Making, Kentucky's Workforce Crisis, and it describes the challenges that we face as having the third lowest workforce participation rate in the nation. It describes some of the programs, the policies, the things that we're doing now to address our workforce shortage and the things that we need to be doing in the future. And the report came to a very important conclusion. The reasons for our workforce shortage are many, and our solutions must be multifaceted. We continue to be hopeful for a sustained recovery, and we are hearing new job announcements coming every day. We are excited to celebrate the expansions of existing companies in Kentucky as well as welcoming new companies to Kentucky. But we cannot only focus on job creation. We must also talk about having the workers to fill those jobs. And I've spoken about this in this committee before, where we think about our economy and how our economy is doing. And it's really two sides of a coin, two sides of an equation. We have to talk about creating jobs, and you will hear the Kentucky Chamber talk about creating jobs all the time. And we will work on policies and programs to do that. But we have to have the workers to fill the jobs. We have to make sure that third shift can operate, for example, and that small business owners have the people to open their doors and to continue to work. And so what's important is that a robust economy is not sustainable when nearly half of the working age population isn't working. Our economic future is uncertain not because businesses don't want to locate or expand here. Our geographical location, our low cost of doing business, our affordable and reliable energy are all reasons to do business in Kentucky, but we cannot become known as a state that is short on workers. This is a huge issue for us to tackle. There isn't one specific bill or one specific program that can address our worker shortage in Kentucky, but House Bill 4 specifically tackles a few of the challenges that we laid out in our workforce report this past summer. One is that Kentucky had one of the longest average durations spent on unemployment in the nation between 2009 and 2019. Too long a duration, 19 weeks on average, when jobs are available and the economy is growing. This harms employment in Kentucky, hurts small business and employers, and it negatively impacts our unemployment insurance system, which could set us up for some pretty serious problems during an economic downturn. And of course, we know that there's a skills gap between workers and available jobs. That's another major challenge that we deal with. And our report pointed out that Kentucky trails the nation when it comes to post-secondary attainment. While we know an increasing number of jobs require some level of training beyond high school, and this trend is going to continue. We're going to see more and more of that in our economy. As Chairman Weber described, this bill ties the maximum number of weeks of benefits available to economic conditions using the unemployment rate. We know that people tend to work more intensely when their benefits are going to end, and reducing the weeks when more jobs are available means getting people back to work more quickly, which is a good thing for workers and a good thing for our economy. And we've seen this happen in other states that have passed similar legislation, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, where they've seen their average duration spent on unemployment go down and their rates of employment growth actually increase. House Bill 4 updates the work search requirements by expanding the definition of what work search is to better reflect a modern-day work search effort, and then increases the number of activities from 1 a week to 5. This encourages a more aggressive search for work and finding next employment. House Bill 4 also encourages laid-off workers to pursue education and training programs by providing 5 additional weeks when you're in a certification program, as Paul spoke about and Chairman Weber spoke about, to really encourage people to get that next level of education and training. And we think that this creates powerful opportunities for workers to seek out programs to increase their employability and their earning potential over time as well, which is really important. And then finally, House Bill 4 provides new flexibility for employers that face a downturn by authorizing the work share program that Chairman Weber described. This is offered in 27 other states, and these programs can help maintain the employer-employee relationship during difficult economic times and ensure workers continue to receive the benefits that their employers are providing. And I think that's really important as well. We know this bill will not solve all of our workforce shortage problem. Additional work must be done to tackle challenges such as childcare, the need for more education and training, transportation, health problems that are a barrier for some who are in need of work. But the Chamber has long championed policies and programs related to these struggles as well, and we will continue to work on those issues during this legislative session. We urge you to take bold steps this session in addressing our workforce shortages, and please support House Bill 4. Thank you.
There's a motion and a second. There is some discussion. Representative Bojanowski, you're recognized.
Thank you. All right, Rep. Weber, you mentioned that changing the base number of unemployment weeks is proven that it strengthens the system. Could you share the research, and it doesn't have to be right now, and then also specify which section of the bill, which line would declare that an increase in benefits would immediately occur based upon a recession or another event that would have to trigger a change in unemployment?
Thank you for that question, Representative. In terms of looking at the experiences of other states that utilize an indexing model to determine the maximum duration of weeks, we mentioned previously that includes states such as North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Kansas, Idaho. Alabama passed legislation in 2019. Tennessee passed legislation in 2021. Other states are considering similar legislation as well. The best approach to consider the experiences of those states is to look at OUI data, to look at things such as how their duration rates changed. You can also look at Bureau of Labor Statistics data to look at how things like their employment rates changed. On the whole, looking at states that have been doing this the longest, I think those are the best states to study for this. Obviously, we can't really use Alabama because they only adopted their law in 2019. But if you look at Georgia, North Carolina, in Florida, they did see decreased rates of benefit duration that were significant. They also saw stronger rates of overall employment growth in comparison to the nation as a whole, and far stronger rates of employment growth in comparison to a state such as Kentucky. So there is good data there suggesting that there was a positive impact from connecting the maximum duration of weeks to the unemployment rate.
May I ask one follow-up?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so yes, I'd appreciate those studies if you would, so I can read them before this is heard on the floor. You know, from what I've read about this, I really don't understand why we need this bill. It can't be because it will increase our labor force, because 9 out of the 10 states with the highest labor force participation rate have a duration of at least 26 weeks. It can't be because we want to support our rural workers, because even though their unemployment rate might be significantly higher than the state average, they will be expected to find jobs as quickly as someone from Louisville. It can't be because we want to support our most experienced workers, because research indicates that it takes longer to find a higher skilled job. If they are forced to accept a lower paying job, they'll be dissatisfied and will leave that job as soon as possible, creating a churn in the workforce. It can't be because we have a budget issue, because there's more than $1 billion in our rainy day fund. And it can't be because we want to help our businesses, because the longer duration of benefits leads to better job matching and makes firms more efficient and productive. So my question is, why aren't we investing in our workforce? And if there's any research that offers a contrasting position from the research I've read, I'd appreciate it.
I'm happy to respond to that. I mean, I think what I need to reiterate is that we have in some years, the longest average duration spent on unemployment. And this is something that we have looked at for years. And these other states that you speak of that have higher workforce participation rates, it's not hard to find. Most states do. That have shorter duration spent on unemployment. I have some of the same questions as to why we have that. Because we have so many jobs available and we have so many education training programs available. And so I think, we can often look at other states and what they're doing, and we're looking specifically at North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, some of these other states that have seen improvement. But we're here because Kentucky has a workforce shortage. We have the third lowest workforce participation rate in the nation, and we know that there are multiple reasons for it. And when we have nearly half of our working age population not working, spending half of the year on unemployment when there are jobs available is a struggle. It's a struggle for small business. It's a struggle across all sectors and across the economy in Kentucky. And so, as I mentioned, this is one approach to dealing with that. We will continue to work on the other challenges we see with our workforce shortage, but we know we have to tackle that long average duration, and some years the longest average duration in the nation on unemployment when we have so many jobs open in Kentucky.
May I respond very briefly?
We have a lot of questions, so we're going to move on, but thank you for your comments. Representative Weber, one follow-up to Representative Bojanowski. The maximum duration at present time is 26 weeks. Is that right? This bill would reduce that to 24 weeks. Is that so? There's a 2 week difference. Would you go into what the calculation was and what the thought process was to go from 26 to 24? It's not a huge difference, but just that's
it was the calculation based on starting the 12 weeks at the low unemployment rate, and as that unemployment rate increases by 0.5%, then it was adding additional weeks to that, and so when it reaches 10%, it hit the 24 mark.
Sure.
And so then after that, after you hit that mark, then there are other factors that would kick in terms of a high unemployment rate like that.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that an individual would still be eligible for up to 24 weeks with this indexing model if the job environment was very bad or there was a very serious situation in the country like we've just experienced. Representative King, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I think my question might be for Chair Weber or any of your guests. One of the common misconceptions is how the unemployment insurance premiums are actually paid. For the folks at home, can you clarify and just educate us all? Do the employees pay those premiums, or is that a responsibility of the employer?
The unemployment insurance program is an employer-paid program.
Employer.
A number of people will comment about that they have those deductions taken from their paychecks, and that's not the case. It is an employer-paid program, 100%.
And I think that's a very important clarification to make, and especially for our folks that are listening in at home. So thank you for making that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Kulkarni, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for presenting. I had a couple of questions. I've heard a lot of, you all have talked about the unemployment rate, worker shortage. I have not heard the word wages once mentioned by anybody in this presentation, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because we have a lot of nuances, and I understand that we want to improve our unemployment insurance system. I understand that that's the intent of everybody presenting this bill. My concern is that if I'm a young person today and I've invested my time, several years, a lot of money in an education, and I have a degree and I have a job, or I get laid off, or I can't find a job, what I'm hearing this bill say is that I need to just find any job available, whether or not that comports with what time and money I've invested in a specific specialty. I'm an attorney. It's a lot of time and effort that goes into, if that's your focus in a career. Are you saying that those folks just need to find any available job because you're looking only at number of jobs and not type of jobs, and we're not giving people enough time to find the best match for their education and experience or career goals. So I'd like a response to that by, I guess, anybody on the panel.
The first thing I would say to that is within the first 6 weeks of receiving benefits, there is tremendous amount of flexibility there for an individual to find a job that reflects their previous work or their previous training. And there's economic benefits to that. If you're a welder, for example, I think there's a lot of economic interest in a laid-off welder that you could find a job continuing as a welder. That would be to the benefit of our economy. After a certain point in time, under this bill, utilizing 6 weeks, you would need to expand what you're open to working for. Ultimately, the unemployment insurance system is not set up for individuals to necessarily go and find their ideal job. Bear in mind, once an individual finds unemployment, whatever that employment might be, there's nothing to stop them from leaving that job once they find the job that they would ultimately be looking for. But bear in mind that the intention behind the unemployment insurance system ever since its inception in the 1930s has been specifically to assist individuals as they transition from one job to another job. The system is effectively not designed to make sure they're finding necessarily their ideal job, but there's nothing to stop that individual from doing that. Once they find a job that will pay more than what they're receiving in unemployment benefits, I think it's important to keep in mind our average benefit rate is higher than most other states, but still about $350 on average. If you look back in previous years, they would find a job that would probably pay more than that. And I think that's a better situation for them. And if they want to continue looking for that job, whether it's in the legal field or another field, they're absolutely entitled to continue doing that. This bill would not stop that in any way.
Quick follow-up. Thank you for that.
You may follow up.
Thank you. Actually, it's a whole other question. I apologize. I also had a question about the UI system itself. Early on, when we were all dealing with, our constituents reaching out to us, we can't get benefits, we need help. A lot of discussion was had about the system itself being outdated, money being provided to update that. And I set up weekly meetings with the UI office to follow that process because the system itself is pretty crucial in all of this discussion. How the claims are processed, how quickly they're processed. And we're asking them, it seems like, for instance, in Section 5, I believe it's page 11, we're asking for audits, to assess whether or not those 5 eligibility requirements are being met. The RFP process is long. It's several months long. The scoring process is probably another several months long. And that's in the hopes that you find a company that's able to develop this software and this technology that we need for this system. That is still going on. This has been going on since the pandemic began. My question is, what allowances are in this bill? Are we going to have another RFP to address those specific concerns for the development of what we're asking the system to do? And then in addition to that, staffing. I understand that there were not very many staff to begin with, that there were some more that were being trained. But again, we're adding a lot more work both to the system and to individuals. So my question is, A, what allowances are made to the system in terms of what we're asking it to do, because we know it's not currently able to do it, and we know that the RFP that was put out does not involve or contemplate any of these requirements. And then staffing for the people that are going to be assessing these claims.
In all the states that have implemented a lot of the components that we're addressing in this bill, they've all been able to implement. Some with took a little bit longer, but they were able to implement them. One of the things I would say that we've heard is that with regard to this system, is we always talk about the IT and we always talk about the system is not capable of handling it. Other states have done this. The additional cost has been relatively small to the system. with regard to the RFP and the new system, we had rather lengthy discussions about what is the best system for the UI system. And we could talk about, and I'll paraphrase Representative Pratt, who's here today. He was a strong advocate of a system that we could take off the shelf, and I think plug in, maybe a reference that he says. That's a pre-prepared system. Or we could develop a custom-made system. And that's the route that the state is going. That's the route that the administration is going on this. So we're looking at $40 to $60 million to develop this new system. Throughout the discussions of the task force, we've talked about additional components that we would like to have in place in this system. We'll be responsible for maintaining this system over the long period of time. And one of the things that I heard is we want this new system so that we can adjust and so that we can add those things that we want to. These things were discussed during the interim. These things are factors that other states have done, and with a custom-made system, we should be in a position where we can add things that we want to. They shouldn't delay the RFP process or the vendors. There's a very select number of vendors out there that do this. This should not be new to them. So with regard to that, I think that we implement the law. These are discussions that have been made. Other states have worked around these requirements. So I think we'll see the Commonwealth do that as well. With regard to additional staff, that's something I've heard. I know there are 2 people that work full-time and another individual, I was told, that works part of the time on verification. These audits shouldn't require a huge amount of additional manpower to accomplish those. And as I've said, and as I've told others that have asked me this question, we're going to have a period of time when this will be implemented, and I would encourage the cabinet to come back. And if there are issues that need to be addressed, and there are some things that we're requiring in this bill, then come back and let's talk about it, and let's make these adjustments. But we have got to start somewhere, and there's some information and data that I think that we need, and there's some components in this bill that, when implemented, we need to begin and start now. Anything you'd like to add?
We have some other members with questions, but I think at this point I'm going to reserve those and ask the opposition to come up, those who have signed up to speak in opposition to this bill. Reverend Dale Raines, Kentucky Council of Churches, Bill Londrigan, the Kentucky State AFL-CIO, and Dustin Pugel, Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. If you would come forward, introduce yourselves for the record and give some remarks to us, and then we'll go back to our question and answer. And whomever wants to start, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bill Londrigan, Kentucky State AFL-CIO. You can just introduce yourself.
Dustin Pugel, the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy.
Pull that closer to you and turn that on, yeah.
There we go. Dustin Pugel, the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy.
I'm Dale Raines, representing the Kentucky Council of Churches.
Would you pull that mic?
There we go.
Whomever wants to start.
Good morning, Mr. Chairperson and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As I said, I am Dale Raines, president of the Kentucky Council of Churches, a body representing 11 different Christian denominations in 16 regional bodies across the state, comprised of over 1,100 congregations and 800,000 Kentuckians. We're one of the broadest, oldest, and most active councils in the country, having provided unified theological reflection from churches, both rural and urban, black and white, rich and poor, for more than 7 decades. We're celebrating our 75th anniversary this coming fall. As a body, we have grave concerns about this bill, and as a reminder, the KCC speaks only when we can do so in unanimity. So hear me when I say there is much about this bill that troubles people of faith and faith leaders. What rationale can there be for enacting a law that will harm Kentuckians already hanging by a thread? What rationale can there be for enacting a law that will force more Kentuckians into the category of the working poor? Should we ever be content with a system where anyone who works remains poor? Think about the indexing system where, well, it may not be the indexing part of it, but the part of the bill that would require at some point a person to accept a job paying barely over half of what they had previously earned. What would that do to their ability to pay their mortgage? What would that do to their ability to pay their rent? How many might end up homeless? Not only the workers, but their families, their children. Are we really willing to sacrifice our neighbors so that some of our corporate neighbors can pay lower wages in order to increase profits? Indexing the number of weeks of benefit to the statewide employment rate will especially harm economically distressed rural communities. On average, over the last decade, 31 Kentucky counties, that's a fourth of the counties in Kentucky, had an unemployment rate at least 30% higher than the state's. And HB 4 will ruthlessly shorten benefits for people in those communities despite the long haul that they face in finding new jobs. Slashing unemployment insurance disproportionately harms Black Kentuckians who face higher rates and longer duration of unemployment. Black Kentuckians made up 16.4% of uninsured unemployment insurance claims in Kentucky in December 2021, compared to making up only 9.3% of the state workforce. And getting a new job is also especially difficult for Kentuckians with disabilities and people who are seeking a second chance coming out of incarceration. Are we that uncaring about these, our neighbors? I and the people who make up the Kentucky Council of Churches sincerely hope not. You know, Jesus preached a message of economic justice to the poor of his time, fully understanding that poverty prevented those who were created in the very image of God from participating in the abundant life he came to give. Please don't put forth this bill that will push more divine image-bearing Kentuckians into poverty. They deserve to share in the abundance that our commonwealth has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, and Mr. Lonergan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. You know, unemployment and unemployment insurance are certainly subjects that's been on all of our minds over the last 2 years. I am sure that every one of you have gotten calls from your constituents regarding problems accessing unemployment insurance. We have been doing the same thing and continue to do so, just as you continue to get calls from desperate constituents who continue to struggle with unemployment insurance. With that in mind, I think you should consider that HB 4 does nothing to address or remedy the current IU crisis facing thousands of Kentuckians. In fact, if HB 4 becomes law, it may very well delay the implementation of that computer system that's at the heart of this problem of accessing benefits. We just discussed that. We think that this RFP will absolutely have to be changed and adjusted to take into consideration these major changes. We also think about Kentucky employers and the tax they pay, unemployment insurance tax. Kentucky employers are already paying less of a share of their total wages on contributions to the IU Trust Fund than they have been at any point in the 84-year history of unemployment insurance. Proponents of HB4 argue that restricting the length of time unemployment benefits are available to claimants will increase our labor force participation rate. The opposite is true. Among the 10 states with the highest labor force participation rate, only one has maximum duration of benefits below 26 weeks, whereas 5 of the 10 states with the lowest labor force participation rate have maximum duration below 26 weeks. So there's no correlation between the length of unemployment benefits and whether workers return to work sooner. And don't forget how IU benefits are spent by unemployed workers. Almost all is spent at the local grocery store, the gas station, the pharmacy, and to pay essential heating, water, and mortgage payments. By cutting the number of weeks, less money will be spent in the local economy. And just imagine what would have happened if these hundreds of millions of dollars were taken out of your local economy during the past 2 years. As you know, Kentucky received hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid to help us get through the severe economic difficulties brought on by the pandemic through the American Rescue Plan and its state and local fiscal recovery fund, of which $312 million was included in the House budget for deposit into the IU Trust Fund in the fiscal year 2023. And according to this letter, which I've just gotten a copy of, and it was sent to President Stivers, Speaker Osborne, and copied to Senator McDaniel, Representative Petrie, and Chair Weber from the State Budget Director John Hicks. And it states, to adhere to the U.S. Treasury's final rule, the General Assembly may choose to appropriate up to $242 million and change from the fund to be deposited into Kentucky's Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, or, and I emphasize or choose to reduce the number of weeks of benefits payable to Kentuckians who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own, not both. End of quote. In other words, Kentucky stands to lose almost $250 million that would otherwise be deposited in the IU Trust Fund. Finally, we need to fix the parts of the IU system that are now broken by implementing a much-needed computerized claims processing system, and we need to shore up the trust fund with the federal dollars available, not cut benefits of hardworking Kentuckians who are already looking for a fair opportunity to maintain their living standards and provide for their families while they're unemployed through no fault of their own. Remember, those folks that need the IU lifeline during these difficult times are your friends, neighbors, and constituents, and with the help of IU benefits, they have a better chance of regaining suitable and sustainable employment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lonergan. Mr. Pugel.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for giving me a few moments to speak on this really critical issue. Like Bill said, all of us in this room received calls throughout 2020 and into 2021 from our neighbors, our loved ones, people who are struggling to get by during the downturn and who are having difficulty with their unemployment insurance benefits. We heard heart-wrenching stories about empty gas tanks, hungry children, missed mortgage payments, and generally increased hardship. What we learned throughout that time is that unemployment insurance is a critical tool during widespread downturns and individual crises. And when it's unavailable, that is catastrophic for workers and their families. House Bill 4 doesn't address those problems and instead moves us in the opposite direction. It cuts off workers' benefits by as much as 54% early, going from 26 weeks, which is the standard that's suggested by the U.S. Department of Labor and is implemented by 41 other states, including Kentucky right now, to as few as 12 weeks. And I just want to say something about that. The way that we calculate the unemployment rate through House Bill 4 in particular looks at the previous 6-month quarter and then the first half of that, not quarter, but the essentially 3 quarters ago. It looks at the average unemployment rate during that time. And that's what determines the unemployment rate during the 6-month period that the claimant files a claim in. So what we're doing is essentially looking back 12 to 9 months previous to find out what the unemployment rate is that will adhere to individuals. That's on page 1 under the definitions. We looked at that standard and we went back all the way to 1990 and found out at no period in the last 30 years would we have ever hit 24 weeks. In fact, if you look at 2020, when our unemployment rate exceeded 16%, we would have only had 12 weeks that entire year. Currently, we would have 14 under the way this operates. That is problematic because we know that folks, especially like we were mentioning, Black Kentuckians and Kentuckians in rural Kentucky, take more time to find suitable employment. Speaking of which, we know that increasing reporting requirements by forcing work search activities to go from 1 to 5 can be problematic as well. And we know from other programs like Medicaid and SNAP that when you increase reporting requirements, you increase the opportunity for people to get tripped up over paperwork. And when it also turn the screws on workers after just 6 weeks, requiring them to take the first job that's offered to them, no matter whether it's in their career field or not, as long as it pays about half of what their last job paid. These 3 things are not a recipe for a stronger economy. They're a recipe for lower wages and increased hardship. And make no mistake, policies like these have increased hardship in other states, but have failed to improve workforce participation elsewhere. We've already heard from others that of the 9 states with less than 26 weeks, 7 are in the bottom half of labor force participation states, and 5 are among the worst 10. And all 9 of them have unfilled jobs, an unfilled job rate that is at or higher than Kentucky right now. It's also important to remember that last year, when half the states cut off unemployment insurance benefits from the federal government early, they didn't see any higher uptick in hiring than Kentucky did. And when Kentucky's own federal benefits expired last September, we also didn't see an uptick in hiring. What's more, this won't help our workforce grow. Like I said, it will hurt workers who live in rural parts of the state, Black workers, laid off coal miners and factory workers, and workers who have served their time after a criminal sentence, all of whom have unemployment rates above the state average. Cutting off the number of weeks early and requiring people to take low-wage jobs punishes workers who face barriers that are outside of their control. As workers already know, navigating Kentucky's unemployment system is dizzyingly difficult. House Bill 4 only adds the tangle of requirements that will almost certainly trip up workers who are already down on their luck, not to mention burden our few unemployment insurance staff. Our state's 50-year-old unemployment insurance technology system can't accommodate these changes, and the current effort to put in a new technology system may have to start all over, as Bill was mentioning, and take much longer to get into effect. We already think that it's going to take 18 to 24 months once the RFP is finalized. We can and should move in a direction that makes unemployment insurance work for, not against Kentucky workers. I'll say that House Bill 4 does that by way of a work-share program, which is badly needed and very popular among both employers and employees in other states, 27 other states. And so we encourage that, but unfortunately, that's where it stops. I urge members of this committee to hit pause on House Bill 4, listen to your working constituents, and help craft an unemployment insurance system that works for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, and I'm going to ask the proponents to come back down with any rebuttal or response that they might have. And then at that point, we will recognize a couple of members for some discussion.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there are several things that we could respond to. I do want to focus on one particular issue, and if you'll indulge me for a moment or two, I think this is a very important issue because it has started to come up, and it's worth talking about in that regards, the United States Treasury rule regarding fiscal recovery funds as they can be used by states. For those of you that might recall, last year, the American Rescue Plan Act include billions of dollars in fiscal recovery funds that could be utilized by states to help shore up their state budgets and also respond to economic distress that was caused by the pandemic. Ever since that legislation was passed, the United States Treasury Department has been slowly releasing guidance to help states understand what they can spend those dollars on. In May of 2017, they released some initial guidance, a very, very long document, very convoluted document that was difficult to understand. Last month, they released what they call their final rule, and that final rule ultimately dictates how states can utilize these dollars. This is a 400-page document. I've had the unpleasant experience of reading it. And that's not to criticize necessarily this rule in particular, but these are convoluted, complex rules that have a lot of ins and outs to them. One of the issues that is raised in the final rule, this is buried within a 400-page rule around page 118, 119, I believe, that stipulates that states that use fiscal recovery funds to replenish unemployment insurance trust funds would be responsible for a maintenance of effort. That maintenance of effort includes provisions that restrict states from doing things such as particularly reducing benefits in some form or another. The key thing that often gets left out of the conversation regarding the Treasury rule is the paragraph that follows the discussion of the maintenance of effort rule. And I'd like to read briefly from that paragraph because I think it's very pertinent to this conversation. That rule goes on to say, until the final rule becomes effective on April 1st, 2022, the interim final rule remains binding and effective. These requirements were not in effect under the interim final rule and do not apply to funds used under the interim final rule while it is in effect. In addition, recognizing that some recipients have taken significant steps toward making a trust fund deposit or repaying principal in the Title 12 advances under the interim final rule, such as legislative appropriation of funds for the purpose, even if a formal obligation has not occurred, Treasury will exercise enforcement discretion to not pursue violations of this final rule provision for recipients that have appropriated funds for this purpose prior to the date of the adoption of the final rule. This is all to say that our interpretation of the Treasury rule is very different from other interpretations out there. It is a complex rule. Our belief is that we can do things such as replenish our unemployment insurance trust fund and pursue House Bill 4 simultaneously, and we believe that the interim or the current final rule from Treasury is consistent on that point. I'll turn over to other folks here to see if they have other parts they want to respond to.
Mr. Chairman, I did just want to offer one point of clarification from what we heard earlier with regard to the 6 week suitable work definition. On page 3 of the bill would be, well, I don't have lines on my copy here, but it's the first added language there. It says, the Secretary shall consider any employment. There is not a hard, fast requirement there that an individual is going to have to take a job that is totally out of sync for them. The Secretary is the final arbitrator there, and he'll have that ability to consider that and see whether it's consistent. So to frame the argument as if we're simply abusing people and kicking them off and making, folks that were making X amount of dollars before accept jobs that are totally out of the range for them, there's built-in mechanisms for that. And I appreciate Charles's comments on the Treasury rule. I hope the members of this committee will see that letter for what it was yesterday. It was just another one of the ruse stall tactics that are being used in this entire process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Truitt, recognized.
My question probably is geared towards the KCTCS director, but maybe you guys can help me. For those that don't know, I am an education principal, elementary principal, and there's parts of this bill that I really like. The part that I really like is this education piece. What I would like to ask and see is, I know you mentioned that a CDL can be attained in 4 to 5 weeks sometimes. What I would like to see is maybe, do you see in the future other options, other degrees, other trainings, other certificates that could be attained in this 4 to 5 week span? with the way our economy is right now, vocational skills are needed for our public and for our workforce. So I would like to see some other trainings, certificates that could be attained in that short time frame, or maybe shorter than what typically is.
Yeah, I think what this does is this actually, if you look at the 12-week and you add the 5-week to it, that fits it within a lot of our 16-week programs, which, I mean, we've got dozens and dozens of programs, whether it be in air conditioning technology, automotive technology, particularly computer and information technology, which are stackable. And so you get your foot in the door, and then as you learn, oh, I'm sorry, is that better? Sorry about that. Rookie mistake.
That's okay.
But yeah, I think it opens the door to more opportunity, and what we're all about is on ramps and off ramps. Is get you in, get you back out working, but as you want to upskill and do that, you can do that, and it's easy to come in and it's affordable.
Representative Callaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the components of this bill. There are some really good areas. The work sharing, I believe, helps both the employee and the employer, and so taking that into consideration. I discussed with you yesterday a little bit about the job search component, rural versus urban, and those concerns, and I appreciate you hearing us out on that. One thing I was wanting to ask about is how does this affect construction or seasonal workforce, and if you could clarify that a little bit in the bill.
Representative Callaway, those individuals that have specific return dates to work, and the individuals that you mentioned there would be those folks. They're allowed 16 weeks, which is kind of the standard. So they wouldn't fall under the requirements of this bill as far as the job searches, as long as they have a specified return date. That's one of the things that we did with the committee sub earlier. We changed that because there was some language in there that might make it a little difficult for some folks that don't necessarily return to a specific employer, but they go through another avenue of getting their work, and we wanted to make sure that those folks were covered and there wasn't any problem with their return. So those folks are covered in this bill. They would not fall under the requirements. And at the end of 16 excuse me, at the end of 16 weeks, if our economy alters and changes, then they would be eligible for the additional federal benefits that would come in. So there's nothing that would harm them in this bill.
And if I may make one more comment.
Very briefly, we
Okay.
have several more members.
Just
so
want
go
to
ahead.
make the comment that I reject the idea that if I support this bill that I am non-caring. We've worked the last year and a half nonstop for people that have not been able to receive their benefits. I still have people from 2020 that have not received their benefits that we have worked tirelessly for, and we will continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Representative Truitt, I wanted to address something that you said earlier to the president, and I understand what you're saying, and I fully support that, and I would be very open to working with you and the president on additional areas that we could strengthen this bill and make it something that could truly help those people. I see this bill as reemployment and as a help to those folks and get them on maybe a career path that's they wanted to go on or is different. But I certainly am open to working with you and the president and any others on ways we can improve this bill and make it stronger.
Representative Lockett, you're recognized.
I just have a question and a comment, and I guess my question is probably to you, Chairman Weber. Section 8 of the bill, I'm looking at page 17, that entire section that deals with where an employer can notify of a no-show or something like that. My question is how will the employers know that this system exists? In other words, how are they going to know that they can report someone that is a no-show?
Some of the various business entities, like the chamber, the small retail federation, those folks have talked to me. They have a lot of their members that have reached out. So I think it'll be a process of educating that membership on making them aware. And then I think just the knowledge of this bill passing, it is an issue that is on the minds of business folks as they've struggled to fill positions. So I think there's awareness out there, and that awareness would be answered, and they would learn about it.
Okay. Real quick, Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah,
could.
very briefly. Thank you.
I also wanted to briefly say, and I think it's important to understand and know that we have areas in our state where there are no jobs available. And I heard a phenomenal speech from a colleague yesterday that talked about this exact same thing, that how can you put requirements on people in areas where there are no jobs. And I implore us as a General Assembly, I implore us as representatives that we also have to work on that component. And I know that's important, but when we have areas that there are no jobs available, we have to work on that as well. I fully support this bill, and I believe that this is a step in the right direction. And I think that as a General Assembly that this is the correct thing to do, but we also have to focus on those parts of the state where employment has to be established as well. So I encourage us all to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Cantrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do kind of want to go back to the letter that we received from Budget Director Hicks on the use of the ARPA money. I talked about this in our meeting a week or two ago when we considered House Bill 144 about freezing the employer rates for the coming year. And I said, we appropriated this $312 million. We're going to have to kind of watch it, right? We're going to have to watch it as it goes through the budget process. Well, now we really need to watch it because now, Charles, as you put it, as you summarized it, we have this 400-page, really complicated, convoluted document that if we pass this bill, we might not even be able to use that money. And we put that money in there because we didn't want to take out another loan, and we wanted to put our trust fund in a little more solvent position. And now we're jeopardizing potentially that money. And so my question is, Charles, you've kind of defended the interpretation of this document. And my question is, did you contact the Treasury Department directly about this bill, what we're considering doing? Because you seem to feel like we're on pretty solid ground. Where is that ground coming from? Is that a legal opinion that you all obtained, or is that from the Treasury Department directly?
I think there are a lot of people trying to contact Treasury at this moment because the rule is so incredibly complex and hinges on a tremendous amount of money. So we know there are several organizations out there that are submitting questions such as this one to Treasury to get full clarity. I will say there has been independent outside analysis done of this rule. You could look at groups such as the Tax Foundation as a good example of this. Who have followed the interpretation that is very much in alignment with the interpretation that we have. So we do feel that this is on solid ground.
But that's a no, right? You didn't reach out to them.
To the Treasury, we have not talked.
We have not independently directly reached out to Treasury. But again, several other, I know, groups are doing this, and this includes groups, I believe, such as NCSL.
But we haven't gotten an answer. It could go either way. You kind of said that before.
I think the operating paragraph that I read is, again, pretty clear.
The operating paragraph that you read, is that talking about...
Let's hold on here. We need to ask a question and then allow him to respond. So I appreciate the enthusiasm, but it's a little too early in the morning for that. So let's have a question and then a response.
We stand by.
So you can re-ask your question, please, and then you can give a response.
I would again just reiterate. I believe the operating paragraph is fairly clear that the interim final rule is in effect until the final rule becomes effective, and I think it's hard to get around that language.
I think
Okay.
part of what I'm
hold
not.
on just a moment. So you're recognized to ask a question or a comment, and then we're going to move on. So thank you.
Part of what I'm not clear about the operating paragraph is that going to be the budget and the appropriation of the money, or is that this bill that cuts benefits? Which one or both of those need to be passed by the operative date? Because you kind of have two things going along simultaneously, and then you have this really unclear guidance.
Again, keeping in mind that interconnection of those two issues, the interim final rule is in effect until the final rule becomes effective on April 1st. So essentially, our read of that rule would be that it is simply not currently in effect until April 1st. And so an appropriation could take place, this legislation could be passed. The language goes on to add even more flexibility in that when it states that there shall be enforcement discretion regarding the maintenance of effort provision, assuming that appropriate steps have taken place. Again, there's a lack of clarity, which is kind of the hallmark of the rule. But again, I think it all points to a very specific direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to take a vote at 9:50. So we have, looks like 9 minutes. Representative Gentry, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much time do we have before we take a vote?
Well, it's 9:41, and so we have to be out of this
9
room
minutes.
at 9:50 is what staff is
Okay.
telling me. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, once again, here we are calling a meeting last night on a very, very important bill that has a lot in it, that affects a lot of people, including working men and women in this state who need help. This is not welfare. These are workers, men and women workers that need help when they lose their jobs, no fault of their own. And there's not enough time. I don't get it. Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman.
Well,
I have all kinds of
We've been here
questions.
since 8:30, Representative Gentry.
Yeah, it takes a long time to cover bills like this.
Well,
you guys are really good at shutting us down.
Well, you're out of order.
You're really good at silencing
we work
facts.
with the schedule that we have, and you're recognized for a question or comment. Are you finished?
Okay, Mr. Chair, I apologize for that, and I'll try to ask something very simple.
You're recognized to do that.
Thank you. So, as I understand this bill and the indexing structure that we're going by to reduce weekly benefits, we're trying to reduce the labor participation, increase labor participation rates. Are you guys saying that you think one of the biggest reasons in labor participation rates being low is because people are milking unemployment and not having an incentive to go back quicker? Is there evidence for that?
Representative, thank you for your question and your passion around this issue. And, we believe there are many reasons why we have a worker shortage. We do. We spelled these out in our report. I've spoken about some of them today, and I promise you we will be back before you, maybe this committee, maybe others, working on legislation that's related to the worker shortage and working on legislation that's related to situations where perhaps you have people who have exhausted their unemployment benefits now at 26 weeks or have long since exhausted and are still struggling in certain areas of the state. We will be working on all of those issues. What we're saying here today is that we have a very long average duration spent on unemployment. And we know from what other states have done that when you are getting close to the end of your benefits, that does speed up looking for work. And we know that we have lots of jobs, over 140,000 jobs open in Kentucky. And so this is a piece, this is of the puzzle. This is one element of the equation that we're focusing on this session to tackle our worker shortage. And we will be involved in so many other policies that are related to any sort of barriers that exist that people face who want to go back to work but are struggling with it. So one piece of the puzzle, one element of the equation, but we think it's an important one, and that's why we're here today in support of House Bill 4.
Thank you, Representative Sheldon, and keep the time constraint in mind, please.
Absolutely. Just quickly, I do also appreciate the concern all of my colleagues have. I get concerned when we attempt to provide a solution, when people spend a couple of years on this and they bring it forward and try to create some solutions. And the concern I have is that it also provides a platform, which this is the way the law works, for people to get up here and have these very intense discussions or speeches about the economy overall, or people caring, not caring, wanting to punish, wanting to harm people. I get concerned about that when I know that this is a step that people are taking with good intent, that purposeful lives are often involve gainful employment. There's not a soul on this committee that doesn't understand that. How we get there, obviously there's some disagreements, but I'd like to see people bring solutions when they have these long poke your holes in somebody's trying to make a difference law. And I commend you for bringing this forward. You knew it was going to be controversial. This is the first step of many, many, many steps it must take. And I say let's see this thing on so it can be talked about on the floor and then in the other chamber. So thank you for it, and we appreciate that. Thank you all for coming.
Representative Bray.
So I've got more of a comment. I'm from one of the 31 economically distressed counties, and before I came up here, part of my job was bringing in business. The largest barrier we have is our workforce participation rate. You can't bring a factory into a county that has more people not working than working. It's impossible. So I applaud you all for trying to fix it. I realize this is a very small piece of the puzzle, but until we solve our workforce participation rate, our economically distressed counties will continue to be that way because we can't bring companies in to places where people unfortunately don't want to work. So thank you all.
Thank you, and I will now entertain a motion to.
We have a motion on the sub.
Well, that was on the sub, wasn't it?
No.
Okay. Okay. So I'm told I'm wrong, and that we already have a motion and a second. So would the clerk please call the roll?
Representative Baker.
Yes.
Representative Banta.
Yes.
Representative Beckler.
Permission to briefly explain my vote?
Yes, you're recognized.
Based on the fact that Representative Weber, when addressing Representative Truitt, indicated he'd be willing to work on possible changes, I'm a reluctant yes to get this bill to the full House for debate. Thank you.
Representative Bojanowski.
May I explain my vote?
Yes, you may.
I spent about a year unemployed, and I was highly credentialed. At the time, I had an MBA. I had significant experience in management, and I happened to go through this period in 2008. So it was a rough time. I collected unemployment. The job I had come out of had minimum pay, so the unemployment was even lower. And as a single mom with 3 children, there is no way that I could have survived on something lower than even what I had earned. What I'd like to say quickly is that that time allowed me to move into a position to gain more education, to become a teacher, so that I would never be unemployed again. So I vote no.
Representative Bray.
Yes.
Representative Brown.
May I explain my vote,
Yes, you
please?
may. You're recognized.
This has been a vigorous, informative presentation, and I appreciate all the people, the proponents and the opponents, as they have made their opinions known. I want to preference my comments and my vote by taking something from Ronald Reagan. He once said they're lies, they're damn lies, and they're statistics. It is important for me as we listen to the debate and the information that is going back and forth that there are people out there in this state that are affected intimately by what it is that we say and what it is that we will do with this bill. House Bill 4, in my opinion, would make future recessions harder, longer, and more painful. I've heard the conversation about workforce over and over and over again, and the workforce problem that we have in this state. In my opinion, this onerous bill is not the answer. I think we have workforce out there in the state, and I would ask us to take a look at House Bill 293, which is ban the box. On applications that says that if you're an ex-felon, you have to check the box. Or you could be, one, your application could be put in file 13, or two, that you could be fired if you got the job for having filled out a fraudulent application. So my vote on this bill, Mr. Chairman, is no.
Representative Callaway?
Yes.
Representative Cantrell? No. Representative Elliott?
Briefly explain my vote. I'm voting yes today. I do still have some concerns that were expressed by Representative Beckler about those areas of Kentucky that are unfortunately don't have the number of jobs that we have in the Golden Triangle. And so I hope that we work to do everything that we can to bring jobs to those areas and the economic development that is so desperately needed in eastern Kentucky. So I vote yes.
Representative Freeland?
Yes, can I explain my vote?
Yes, you may.
Yes, I vote to move this forward, and I appreciate the consideration for the areas impacted by the tornado. And I hate to admit I have to agree with Representative Beckler, and hope that some more work can be done, but I'm voting yes.
Representative Gentry?
Explain my vote, please.
Yes, you may.
Thank you. I'm voting no today because I don't feel like I've had adequate enough time to ask questions that I have on the bill. I'm also voting no today because I don't believe a plan to reduce labor participation rates by slashing benefits to working families works. It's bad policy. And I'm also voting no today simply because I think this bill is about reducing employer tax that funds the trust fund. And it's in essence, whether intended or not intended, takes money away from those that really need it badly. That's working men and women who lose their jobs for no fault of their own. Thank you.
Representative Hart?
Yes.
Representative Huff?
Yes.
Representative Johnson?
Yes.
Representative King?
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Kulkarni?
Briefly explain my vote.
Yes, you're recognized.
I'm going to vote no today. My main concerns are still the nuance in terms of what jobs we're asking people to get based on their experience or education, the time frame that we're forcing them off unemployment, and then also questions about the system. But in the spirit of Representative Sheldon's comments, I will be reaching out to you, Representative Weber, and the Cabinet and all of you to discuss the nuances of those specific points. So I'm a no today, but I'm hopeful for some changes. Thank you.
Representative Lawrence?
Permission to explain my vote,
Yes,
please.
you may.
I want to thank all the presenters for being here today on both sides. I know that there's a lot of mixed emotions. The last few days I have spent many hours on the phone with employers throughout my district where I'm from. These are employers that are paying anywhere from $12 to $25 an hour. And they explained to me that a lot of the phone calls that they had made to folks that had applied for positions would tell them, I can't start until my unemployment runs out. And so because of that today, I want to cast a yes vote for that. Thank you.
Representative Lockett?
Explain my vote, please.
Yes, you're recognized.
I think it's important to understand and realize how, or one of the contributing factors to where and how we got where we are today. All of us up here spent a lot of last year taking phone calls and emails from constituents that got zero response from this administration. Deleted emails, unanswered phone calls, couldn't get through. And I believe that this is a small piece to fix that problem and to hopefully go in the right direction for the people of Kentucky. So I vote yes.
Representative Rowland, Representative Sharp.
Briefly explain my
You're
vote, please.
recognized.
I have some of the same concerns as Representative Lockett, and we saw that prior to the pandemic that the state was considered in full employment, and they shut down a lot of the unemployment offices. Well, the area I represent in eastern Kentucky was never even close to full unemployment. So I've got some concerns about that, but I do like the bill. There's a lot of good things in this bill I think that we can build upon. So at this point in time, I'm going to pass on my vote.
Representative Sheldon,
Yes, thank you.
Representative Tackett Lafferty, Representative Truitt.
Briefly speak on the vote.
Yes, you're recognized.
I'm going to vote yes today. Like I said earlier, I do like parts of this bill. I really do. We do need to, I want to echo my colleagues in talking about, the shortages of jobs in eastern Kentucky. We as a body have got to do something about those issues. We've got to do whatever we can to create these jobs for these people so they can go back to work. There's no better feeling than earning that paycheck, and I want every kid, I want every adult to experience that. So today I do vote yes, and I look forward to working on tweaking some things to fix the problems in eastern Kentucky.
Chairman Weber.
Yes. The bill is passed, 16 yea, 5 nay, and 1 pass vote. So the bill should move to the floor with favorable expression.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
I'll
members of
entertain
the
a
committee.
motion to stand adjourned. Stand adjourned.